Hi, everybody. This is Kate Hailey. As you may know, I work with Glazer's Camera. I run all the events for the store. And for this session, I'm actually teaching this session. Many of you who have come to events with Glazers, especially over the past couple of years, know that I teach a lot of workshops and lead a lot of events for the store as well. So today I'm going to talk about portrait photography and creative portrait techniques. So we have a 45-minute to about an hour session with a bunch of slides and images. I'm going to talk about how I lit things and what tools I used. And we also, since I'm presenting today, we have Devin behind the scenes who is going to be asking me the questions for a change. So if you have questions during the session, please feel free to post those either on the Facebook comments or on YouTube. And as we move through this, we'll do some Q&A as well. So don't be shy, ask those questions. And like I said, today we're going to talk about creative portraiture. So with that in mind, we'll kick over to my slideshow. And we're going to just get this going. So a little bit about me. I'm a portrait photographer. I do a lot of headshots and creative portrait collaborations. So for my day-to-day portrait work, it's lots of corporate headshots and things like that. But over the past few years, I've collaborated with a lot of great creatives and models and pushed through some of those traditional techniques and created some really cool stuff. And that's what I want to talk about today. There's some essential lighting techniques and thoughts behind all of these images, but in a lot of them, I'm using tools from Lensbaby, different kind of lighting options to just kind of create something that's a little bit different. So I'm going to share some images and talk about them. And then please, if you have questions about what was used or maybe why I took a certain approach, don't be shy and ask those questions. For me, while I love creating portraits for my clients, I also love the creative side of imagery, of telling a story in a different way, of adding color or texture, making it blurry. You know, everything doesn't have to be tack sharp. So these are the things that we kind of want to think about a little bit. We are taught with photography, everything should be tack sharp and everything should be pristine and perfect. And yes, for certain things that totally comes into play. But this is about pushing through those, about using different tips and tools and techniques to create something with a different look. It's through this experimentation and these collaborations with awesome people like this is Kate. She's modeled for me a few times over the past couple of years. And just working with people and just kind of creating something that's just a little bit different, has a little bit of a different feel, a little bit of a different look. So for each of these images, as we kind of talk through it, on each slide, you're going to see what gear was used. So if you have questions about that gear and why it was selected, again, don't be shy. This is just a Omni filter, which I'll show you guys in a minute, over my camera lens and then light coming in, and it's creating all these rainbow effects. This is that same tool, but with different light and actually a second tool added in. So thinking about light, thinking about these creative tools that we'll talk about, thinking about how you can use them to create something that just stands out a little bit differently. For me as a creative, it's so valuable and it's so important. But I want to start with just kind of some basic things. So when we think about the creative tools, you know, most of us have a camera and a couple of good lenses that get us going. And for most of my portrait work, I'm using the Fujifilm X-T2 currently. My go-to lenses for portraits are the 35-1.4 and the 56-1.2. So for pretty much any portrait session, that's what's going to be on my camera. But depending on my client or depending on the person I'm collaborating with, I might shift and implement using some Lensbaby tools. And this is why. They create different effects. They have a softer look to them. They create intentional blur. And in some cases, like with a twist lens, you can create some crazy backgrounds. So we're going to talk about when and where we might use those. This image that we're starting off with is a very moody portrait of a friend of mine. He's an artist, but he also makes a living as a person who does web design. And when we got together to do his portrait session, he needed two things. He wanted something that was a little bit moodier, a little bit more dramatic to kind of tell the story of him as an artist. And then he wanted something that was more the web design guy, the tech guy. And so we started with this. This was the tech guy headshot, you know, lit with the Westcott beauty dish using just an old Nikon SB600. right here on camera and then filling in under his chin with a little reflector. Shot with the Fujifilm X-T2 and the 35-1.4. Great smile, nice clean background. This is totally what he needed for that part of who he is as someone who makes a living, right?
He definitely looks very tech guy.
But that was the goal. You know, with any client, I sit down and I have a conversation with them, or we have a call and we talk about what are your goals, what are your needs for this session. And if there's an opportunity to do some creative stuff, I'm always so stoked because, you know, hopefully I can get a portfolio shot out of every session. And there's lots of photographers who also try and make that happen. After we got his tech guy shot and he was like, yeah, that's totally what I need for that, we shifted. I switched over to the Lensbaby lens at some point, which I'm going to get to in the next slide. I'm talking ahead of myself here. But in here, you can see I've switched backgrounds. I've gone to this Crimson Savage paper. I'm still using that beauty dish from Westcott, which is giving me that nice directed light. It's highlighting his bone structure a little bit, and that's part of what I love about the beauty dish. While it's a small light source, relatively, it helps create definition in a face, especially with the good bone structure and stuff. But what is nice about this image is it's another clean image. There's lots of detail, there's lots of information. But as I switch to the Lensbaby Trio, notice the softness in his hair. Notice the softness around his face and how that's shifted. So I'm going to switch back to this shot to this shot. It's also affected kind of the tones of the image a little bit, and it's just something that I kind of really appreciate. I like that softness coming into play. And here was where we really shifted. This became one of his favorite shots from the session because it started to play more into the artistic side of him. And then because he's someone that I've known for a long time, when I said, hey, let's try some double exposures and just get really silly, we did this in camera with the Fujifilm X-T2 or other Fujifilm cameras. You can do double exposures in camera. And so it's silly, but it's also serious and different. So trying these different techniques is a lot of fun. And the cool thing with like the XT series is that you can take that first shot and then recompose the second shot over it. So you see exactly what's happening before you take the photo. So it's really awesome. And then for a couple of frames, we went outside because I really wanted to play around with the Trio 28. And the cool thing about the Trio 28 is that it actually has 3 lenses on it. One is a sweet lens, which has super soft edges. One is a velvet lens, which would give you this look where there's some sharpness and then the soft fall off. And then the third lens is the twist. And this is just a lot of fun. So we popped outside to get a few photos, and my goal was to wrap the background around him with that twist lens. There's a couple of tricks that you need to know if you have this lens or are thinking about getting one. Is you need to be at a certain place with your subject, and that subject needs to be a certain distance from the background to really get the twist to come into play. So what we did here was I composed the frame, and then we moved. Sometimes I was walking backwards as he was walking towards me, and then as I was looking through the camera, I would say, okay, stop right there, because I could see how that twist was starting to form, but he was in focus. So this became another favorite from the session just because it's so different. It's got that different look to it.
That's really cool.
Thank you, Devin. So, but this is what is so much fun. You know, I have a mom, she's still around, sorry mom, but she's a painter. She does abstract paintings. So growing up around that, I always wanted to try that and dabble in that, but I can't paint. So photography became my main creative tool. And when I can, I'm trying to implement some more creative abstract techniques into my images. And if you tuned in this morning, a lot of the stuff that Bender was doing is like totally like stuff I love to do. So thinking a little bit more, playing around with different techniques. So this is Lizzie. I got to do a session with her this past December before she headed out to Australia to move there for a while. And we had a meeting before we did the session. We talked about color palette, we talked about lighting, we talked about how her hair would be. We planned, we brought in a makeup artist, and we just kind of went for it. And this was a collaborative shoot, and so much fun. I love her hair. We talked about having like this bright, vibrant background, and her sweater matches it perfectly. Like it just like when she showed up and she showed me the sweater, I was like, oh my God, look at the paper. This is so great. And for some of the shots, I went back to using my Fuji lenses, but for some of the shots I knew I wanted to play around with the Velvet 56 from Lensbaby. And so what I want to point out, especially on this first frame, is this is, again, the X-T2 with the 35-1.4, and just look at the detail in her hair. You can see the edge detail, you can see every hair, and it just looks amazing. Lit with a beauty dish from Westcott off to the side there, and then a little reflector for fill. But going to the next image, I switched over to the Lensbaby Velvet 56, which if you're on a crop sensor camera, that's about equivalent to an 85. And here, you can see the top of her hair is starting to soften a little bit. One of the things that you do want to keep in mind with Lensbaby is many of those lenses have the option to go to like f2.8 or even a wider aperture. Be careful when you're using those wide apertures because it's very easy to lose where your focus is. Many of those Lensbaby lenses are designed to have a soft focus on them. So you can see here, there's great detail in her face, but I'm shooting this at about f4. So I rarely use Lensbaby all the way open. Normally I'm at about f4, which will still give me some of that soft detail, but deeper detail like in the face or the eyes and that kind of thing. As I shift to this image, this one's even a little bit softer and the focus is a little bit missed. So that's the drawback sometimes with Lensbaby. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. If you're using Lensbaby on mirrorless cameras, be sure to have your focus peaking enabled. Now, the focus peaking won't display as sharply as it does with traditional lenses, but it will at least help guide you to where your focus is in the frame. So just keep that in mind. Focus peaking, especially with Lensbaby, is a really good combination. So shifting back into studio shots, this is Caitlin, again, another wonderful individual I've had the opportunity to collaborate with a couple of times, both for workshops and these kinds of sessions. And for each of these sessions, I kind of did this transition from getting some shots with the regular Fuji lenses and then shifting into either the Velvet lens, the 56 from Lensbaby, or the Trio 28. So here is just more of a traditional beauty setup. Again, we brought a makeup artist in, so she had her makeup done. And this is just very simply lit. Beauty dish, that's helping to bring out those great cheekbones she has. And for some of these, I did not fill in with a reflector underneath because I like a little drama in my photos sometimes. So sometimes it's nice to maybe not have that fill. So for a couple of these, there's no fill with a reflector, and I'm just taking advantage of that beauty dish and that slightly harder light that it can, create with a little bit of edge. But here's a shot with the 35 f1.4, and then we shift to the 56 Velvet from Lensbaby again. And if you'll notice, her hair is softer at the edges. She's giving me that little perked up eye. It's just got a little bit of a different look to it. Overall, there's a softness that comes into it that I just really kind of love. Then we got creative with the lighting, and one of my favorite things to do is add some color into a shot, play around with gels and things like that, and that can be easily done with Magmod Modifiers. So you could get this gel holder from Magmod, and that goes on your speed lights, and sometimes I'll pair that up with this grid, and that helps it give me a more directed light on my subject. So this for a gel, this for the grid. Sometimes they don't want to, when they want to magnetize together. But this you can just pop over a speed light. I have one of these in my kit. I'm about to order another set, so I could do 2 speed lights with this kind of combo on it. But I use their creative gel kit. I think there's like 12 different colors in there. And for this shot, we're using this pink. And it's just a lot of fun. It adds just a little pop of color. But if you notice, that gray background now has a little bit of pink because of the position of the light. So it's putting a little bit of pink on that background. We got a little pink on her hair and a little bit on the edge, maybe just a touch of it on her nose. Again, with the Velvet 56, so we have some softness and slightly different angle of the face. Again, that beauty dish is the main light is helping to define cheekbones and her chin, and it's just really lovely. Devin, do we have any questions yet?
None pertaining to what you've talked about.
Okay. Well, we'll hold those to the end.
I have somebody who asked, how is the 51.8, which doesn't quite translate to what you shoot, but...
Oh, the 51.8?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't used that one.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's, yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk about other stuff later. So hang on. We'll get to those non-related questions in a moment. So here's one more shot with Caitlin. And what we did here, as you can see, I just brought the light over a little bit more. So there's a lot more of the pink on her hair. We've got a little edge of pink on her nose, a bit more on her shoulder. And because I've also shifted that light, there's more of the pink falling onto the background. So here's a little bit of pink, and here's a lot more pink. So it's just with a slight movement of that light, you can really even just shift the overall look of your background. And there's also like a shift in her chin, and in this shot it's raised up a little bit. Here it's pushed down a little bit. So the other thing to think about when you're working with people is do like, not necessarily micro expressions, but have slight movements. When the face tilts like from here to here, right, you're getting different looks from the light. So as you're working with someone, just kind of give them a gentle direction to turn this way or turn that way, and just kind of play around with it. Okay, I'm talking way too fast now, so you guys better have some questions queued up for me. I want to talk a little bit more about Magmod, and I realized that I did not bring this modifier in with me to kind of show you what it looks like. But there is this modifier from Magmod called the Mag Beam, and it is a lot of fun. Oh, I'm missing 2 slides. Hang on one second, guys.
In the meantime, I can bring up the mag beam.
Where did those slides go? Weird. Okay. Well, this is one example with the mag beam. I have these other shots that I apparently didn't save my slideshow, so sorry. But the cool thing about the mag beam is that it will create different beams of light, and it has these masks that you can put over the beam of light. And this is just a different attachment that can go on the front of a speed light. And you can project those masks onto the background or on your subject to create kind of a different effect. So what we kind of talked about, this is April, and what we kind of talked about here was that this particular effect looked like brains behind her, which was just kind of like, okay, that's kind of weird, but it was funny. So the main light is that Nikon SB600, and yes, SB600, that is really an old flash of mine, but it still works. So I use all my gear until it stops working on me. But here we have that beauty dish as the main light, and then the mag beam behind her on the Savage paper background. And it's just reflecting that little pattern. It's passing that light through the pattern to create that pattern bigger on the wall. So if you're curious about playing with like projections and things like that, there's a lot of tools out there you can get, but the mag beam is a ton of fun for sure. Okay. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about just a little bit is the Omni Filter Kit from Lensbaby. So it's gonna look crazy, but I actually brought mine in to kind of show you guys what this is. So basically it's a ring system that you can screw right onto the front of your camera lenses. And the kit comes in 2 different sizes. This is actually the larger one to fit my biggest lens. And then you just use stepping rings to attach it to different lens sizes that you have. So I actually have stepping rings that go down to 43 for all of the different lenses that I own. So that means I can quickly go from a bigger lens to a smaller lens. And these are just little refraction tools. So this is a rainbow film that you can put over the lens, and it just creates this little rainbow effect. And you're gonna see that in a few frames, and actually you probably have seen it in one already. What is nice about this kit is that you can position these filters over your lenses and be able to recreate an effect over and over again. Because once you are placing this in view, and I always do this obviously with my camera, and as I'm just moving this around, I get to see it through the lens. And one recommendation I do have with this is to use continuous lights where you can, or modeling lights if your lights have modeling lights. because it's hard to see what the effect will be if you don't have some light coming at you. So here we were probably using this guy right here. So this one's kind of got a mirrored effect to create that glow on the right side of the image. And then the main light is just a blue gel over that main light. But one of the things that I have started to really love about this is creating these crazy colors and rainbows and reflections and refractions, and just add some like interesting techniques. But this is called the Omni Filter Kit. This is made by Lensbaby. Like I said, it comes in a different couple of sizes, and there's expansion kits you can get. So the basic kit comes with all of this stuff plus 3 tools that you can attach to the front. So you could actually use 2 or 3 of these at once. And then you can get an expansion kit that has even more filter options. So there's prisms and other things that you can shoot through to create different kinds of effects. But here we have that blue light and we have that glow behind her, and that's just a bare flash in the background, just creating that really bright glow. On this slide, I brought the light over a little bit, so there's less of it coming directly into the lens, but it's, you know, highlighting her hair. And so we have like this really blue and then this really kind of almost white light off to the side. And again, you know, playing around with these tools and positioning them as I'm shooting, I can see where that beam is going to happen. It is harder if you're using flashes without modeling light, I'm not going to lie. So for some of these shots, we took more than I normally would because I was using speed lights with them. If you have continuous light options available, or you're out shooting in available light and on a sunny day or something, you're going to see immediate results with these. And this is also inexpensive and it's so much fun.
We do have one question, I believe is pertaining to this. Is the flash behind the subject? I don't know.
On both of these, it's like kind of like almost like a hair light.
Yeah.
So behind and to the side. On this shot, it's angled more directly at my lens, which is what's creating that kind of flare and glow.
Okay.
And then this shot, I angled it more away from the lens, but more on her. So if you can see the difference there.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. So yes. So
Also,
kind of almost a traditional hair light position, but a slight variation.
Also,
So.
Roman says this is cool.
Thank you. It's so much fun. This is also, I mean, this is another session about experimentation, about trying different things, pushing through that normal stuff that we are trained to think that we need to do all the time, and just having some fun. You know, I think portraits tell a story, and then when we can add maybe some texture and layers and different elements, they can add a different story, you know. And I think the best part of it too is when you find people to collaborate with who just want to hang out and create cool, fun work, it really is so awesome. And everyone that you're seeing in these frames, no one got paid for these shoots. I'm super grateful for their time. I give them the photos that they can use, obviously, and I'm always ever grateful for all of their time and energy. And at least one of these people so far, we're planning a collaborative shoot once we can start doing that again here in Seattle. So one more with Caitlin. This ended up being a fave, and I went for black and white on this because I kind of liked the variation of tones here. And that was actually just using this tool, and this is in the primary kit. I know it's kind of hard to see these, like I'm just showing them on screen, but it just refracts and it can also reflect. So when you're putting this over your lens, play around with it slowly at different angles and see what you can get created. But this is like a stretch, so it's a lot of fun. Okay, and then we go back to Miss Kate Nelson, who's also awesome. When I did this is a shorter version of a 3 or 4 hour class that I've actually done here at the store, where the last one we did, Kate came in and modeled for me. But in preparation for this, she and I spent a couple of hours together collaborating and trying the different filters and different lights and just having a ton of fun. And this is back to the rainbow film here, this little, and it's so thin. It's so easy to, you know, drop this one. But this is the only one in the kit that won't break because it's like plastic, which is good because I've definitely dropped that one the most. But you know, with this film, there's the sunlight coming in from the window. So this is just available light in the space that I shoot in. And there's just these little streaks of rainbow, and it's just fun. And yes, this image is softer. I'm using the Lensbaby Velvet 56, which is a little bit softer already. I have that film over it, which creates another layer of softness. So portraits don't have to be tack sharp and in focus all the time. It's okay for there to be some blur and some movement and some funky lights, and just have fun with it. That's really what I want to convey. If you get nothing else out of this, try different things and have fun.
Speaking of Lensbaby lenses,
Yes.
Daniel asks, is working with Lensbaby lenses a lot of experimentation, or is it something you can pre-visualize with enough experience?
I'm going to say yes to that.
Both.
Because there is a learning curve with Lensbaby, because we are used to being able to see things so sharply with our traditional lenses. So as you are working with Lensbaby lenses, like I said earlier, don't just go to 2.8. Don't open that lens up all the way. Go to 4, go to 5.6, so that out of the gate, you're going to have a little bit better results. It also depends on which lens you're using. If you're getting into the composer system, you're going to find, especially with the tilting options, you're going to find more blur when you open the aperture up in combination with like a composer and say the Sweet 35 optic. That's going to be a ton of blur. So, you know, just be careful. It really is about experimentation. And I do believe, yes, you can definitely kind of, once you get some experience in with those, you can know what you're going to get out of it. You know, going back to that shot with my friend and the twisted trees behind him, I knew what I wanted to get, but I knew there were certain things that had to be right for me to be able to get it. And literally, I'm like this with my camera, walking backwards on a sidewalk that's uneven because tree roots, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm probably gonna fall while trying to make this happen. But I knew that I needed him to be at a certain distance and for that tree to be a certain distance away from him. So it's definitely about experimenting, but as you get good at it and as you get comfortable with it, you can definitely pre-visualize and know. But focus peaking, if you have that as an option on your camera, is gonna help you a lot too. And just, again, don't shoot wide open until you're super comfortable, unless your goal is like something super, super soft, okay?
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So this is that same session with Kate, and what I like to share is we went from this, we changed the background up, and then I have a totally different background. We probably did 4 or 5 sets in about 2 hours. I think I shot 140 photos, and there was like 90 of them that she loved, which is pretty good. The background here is another layer. So I took a bunch of aluminum foil and glue sticked it to a piece of foam core, and that was my background. And I threw a speed light with this Magmod gel system and a blue gel, and then I did a pink gel. So there's a couple of variations. There's one with blue, there's one with pink, because I really wanted a different pop of color in the background. So the gel is, and the speed light are lighting up the background, and because I'm shooting in a kind of shallow depth of field, it's all just bokeh. It's like gorgeous, beautiful, shiny, glittery bokeh, and I love it.
Yeah, the rendering on that's really awesome.
Yeah, and if you know anything about me, I love glitter, so like I always have glittery nails. So anyhow, but on the front of the lens, so I'm shooting with my Fuji 56 1.2, which is my absolute favorite lens for portraits. But guess what I got over the lens? I have this guy and this film over there, and that's creating just these soft streaks of the rainbow light. And that main light, again, is the Beauty Dish with a different speed light from Westcott. So if you haven't guessed, I love the Westcott Joel Grimes Beauty Dish. It's used in almost every single one of these shots. So that is my go-to for my speed lights. So this is one shot. And then another shot we got in the same session. I put some little Christmas lights behind her. I'm still on the 56-1.2. We've got some good separation from the background, so it's really blurred, and there's just this little glow thing happening behind her. And that's actually over that silver background that I made. And then, which I didn't bring with me, there's one light on here really, and I'm just filling her face with a Profoto C1 Plus. So it's this little handheld light that you can use with your phone or with the Profoto system. But that little glow of rainbow over her head is, guess what? The same filter, but with a different light. And basically, I had this attached to my camera, so I had my camera in one hand, and that light, I was just hand holding. and I was watching for it to come into the frame so I could get that glow at the top of her head. So that was just like me just playing around. And that's what's so awesome about this filter kit, is that once I get the position of it, because if you look along the bottom of her face, it's actually framed really well with the streaks of the rainbow, right? But that positioning can happen. And then I'm just holding that ProPhoto C1 Plus right here until I get it to where I want it, and then I can shoot. So, you know, 2 hands were busy on that one. Here's another shot with that ProPhoto C1 Plus. It's just a little bit more dramatic, and the rainbows are in a little bit different place. But just look at that variation on what you can get. So I just really love these. We just had so much fun. We basically hung out for a couple hours and just had a ton of fun with this. Now going to the workshop that I talked about, this was actually a shot from that workshop here at Glazer's Camera. And this was lit with 2 Westcott ice lights, which are these kind of like light sticks. They're LEDs. They're pretty powerful, but there were just 2 kind of positioned here. And if you look closely, you can see the catch lights in her eyes of those. And then I've got that same film reflector refracting the rainbow light on her face. And this is also the XT2 with the 56 1.2. So just have fun with it. Any other questions so far, Devin?
Elizabeth asks if you crinkled the aluminum foil before gluing it to the foam core.
I crinkled it as I glued.
Yes.
Good question. But that crinkling is how you can help achieve that like crazy bokeh, for sure.
Good technique.
Yes. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit more about playing around with color. So this is shot with, oh my God, I love these. So this is called Illumi. This is from a company called Spiffy Gear. And we got these in the fall of last year. And as soon as we got them, I was like, oh, I have to have that. So it's a little LED light. There's 4 power outputs. And then what's cool is, can you see the red glow on my face? Whoa. They're RGB or bicolor. So I have a couple of RGB ones. So there's blue and then there's green. And then you can have like subcolors. So the green shifts into kind of like a yellow. You can have pink, you know, because me, I like pink. But these are a lot of fun to play with. And then they're also bracelets. So, you know, if you want to go to a party and rave it up, like you could do that. These are a lot of fun. These are super inexpensive. They're $45 each. And I bought one. I was like, oh, I'm going to end up buying 2. And of course, now I have 2. But this is a shot of Caitlin is just lit with one of these little Lumis. That's it. We took advantage of the garage here at Glazer's Camera. And there's a bunch of light down here that's terrible. And I killed the background and just used this and pushed my ISO just a little bit, shot wide open on my 35-1.4. And you can see my shutter speed's pretty slow, 1/17 of a second. I don't recommend that handheld. Technically, I should have gone to a higher ISO, but she had been helping us model for a different event, and I didn't want to take up too much of her time. So the shot came out pretty good. It's just a little bit of light, and because of where it's positioned, it's also helping to define the cheekbones. So tons of fun to play with, inexpensive, a great way to kind of learn and start adding some color into your shots. This is a series that we did during a Sony event last year where we had a couple models, and I set up some Westcott Flex RGB lights. So they're these light panels. They're 1x1, 1x2, different kinds of things. And they have like all the colors available. So we were playing around with complementary and secondary colors and just having a lot of fun. And what I love about these shots is, and what I want to talk about, is how the slightest movements can change how that light falls. You know, here, the subject, this is Michael, he's looking straight at me on the camera, right? And so there's a pretty defined line of those colors coming together and blending a little bit, but it creates a very defined line. As he shifts, you can see that some of the orange color is shifting onto his other cheek, the opposite cheek. And some of that purple is on the collar of his shirt. So they kind of start to blend a little bit more. So when we think about straight on and then moving slightly and then moving yet again, We have more of the purple across the majority of his face, and then some of the orange coming in to kind of frame it. So when we think about this, I love playing around with micro movements to just see how I can get that light to fall. Just a few more images, so if you're gonna have questions, go ahead and get those questions posted. This is Kate again. We had hired her to help model for this event. And for this, we started off with like this orange and a little bit of a greenish teal. And I just loved the way this is falling on her. You can see it's also hitting her shoulders. There's a little bit of light of the orange on one side. There's a little green in her other eye. But as we shifted color, as we moved her and changed her pose, the light falls in different ways. On this one, there's a ton of red across her shoulders and chest, and obviously red on her face, but then that teal is coming in and filling in, and I find it super interesting. And then in this shot, she's faced more towards the teal with just a hint of the red coming in on the left side. So adding color, looking at a color wheel and learning about color theory is another way you can create mood in an image. When we see images that are a little bit blue or teal, we think about cooler, feeling cold almost. When we have images that are warmer, it can kind of give a sense of warmth. Think about watching a sunset photo on a beach, right? It's typically warm, right? But then if you see a photo of the ocean and you kind of feel like you're in it and it's blue and it's cool and moody. So thinking about playing around with color is so much fun. There's another tool that if you're not ready to invest in Westcott flex lights, which can be a little bit expensive, but you can rent them to try around with. Something that's small, that's only $90, is this little aperture MC light. So this is also RGB or bicolor. And again, I'm on pink here, but I can very quickly go in and shift the hue. So now it's blue, or I can go to green or red or orange or whatever I want to. And so, thinking about having a different kind of light, and because there's other lights in here, it's not going to look quite as powerful. Like if this overhead light was off of me right now, like that, now I'm green. But look at how much light you can get from that. Just, this one little light can do so much. So, and maybe that main light should come back on again.
I like having absolute control.
Devin is in control of everything. But the other thing that's cool about this is that if you guys are doing video conferencing right now and all these Zoom calls, you could have this as your light so people can see your beautiful faces when you're doing those sessions. But it's just with a quick button push that I can actually go from, from the color to, there's an effect mode. We're gonna get out of that super quick. But I can also go to bicolor. So I can have a warm light or a cool light.
Nice. We do have some comments and questions. Victoria of Canada says, great lighting, thinking outside the box with color and light. I'm Canadian, we put a U in color.
Yes.
So she's having a great time. And Elizabeth again asks, do you photograph models from behind the camera or do you use a remote and stand off to the side and shoot tethered?
I do shoot tethered. Sometimes I use a remote, but normally I'm still behind the camera. If I'm working with someone that maybe needs a little bit more help posing, I might step away from the camera a little bit. But most of the models I worked with, I've been fortunate to work with some super talented folks, and they know how to move themselves very well, but they also take direction well. So probably the biggest challenge with posing is learning how to pose people. And that comes with time and practice. So that's, sometimes I'm on a tripod, but a lot of times I shoot handheld. It just kind of depends on what's going on. Shooting handheld gives me the freedom to move around. Sometimes I might, for the session with Lizzie, the girl with the awesome hair, some of those shots, she sat down on the floor, so I had to get low. So shooting on a tripod is more challenging for that. Some of the traditional headshot stuff, I might be on a tripod. I do try and shoot tethered as much as I can for these kinds of sessions, so I can see the images a little bit bigger and know immediately if there's a problem. So that's definitely a key component. So hopefully that helps answer that.
Yeah, excellent. A lot of people are asking what that light was again, and it is the aperture.
Wait. Look at this. Look at this.
Oh,
Make that big.
there we go. Well then.
So if you want to, this will also be part of the live rewatch, but feel free to take a screenshot of this. This is the gear list. I'm pretty sure I listed everything I talked about in these sessions. But that light, this is the Aperture MC. The store does have these in stock. Like I said, I think it's about $90.
$90.
And it's super robust. It charges with a USB cable. And I was just telling Devin before we started, I was like, I need to get a second one of these.
Or a third or a fourth.
Oh, hush. Well, I have other lights, so having one or two is fine. But it's also great to have that or like the C1 Plus because I can have it in my bag. It's small, it doesn't take up a ton of room, and I have a great light immediately that I can use.
Daniel says, I think working with color is probably easier with continuous light sources. I would agree with that.
I would agree with that as well. But I'm not scared of gels. You know, I started in photography pretty early on, and working with continuous lights in the studio environment when I got my start was not a thing. We gelled everything. So very early on, I learned about using gels. And I think that the Magmod system is great for that because their gels are practically indestructible. They're kind of hard plastic gels. And they have 2 or 3 different kits available. They have a color correction kit, so that'll give you like CTO gels and CTB gels. And then they have a couple of creative and artistic kits. And so I have all of them because it's also nice to be able to, like, I know that I can recreate this with gelled speedlights if I need to. But this was done with continuous. It is easier because you can see immediately where that light is falling. If you're doing this stuff with speedlights, it's harder because most speedlights do not have modeling lights. Profoto has the A1, which is a small studio strobe, which kind of is similar to speedlights. That has a modeling light, but most speedlights do not have a modeling light. So the key thing is with continuous, you get to see exactly what's happening. With speedlights, not so much. If you're using studio lights like Profoto B10s or Westcott FJ400s, you can use those modeling lights, see where the light's falling, and then you're good to go. It just depends on what you're comfortable with too.
Speaking of a speed light, somebody asked, Rick was wondering, are you using a silver or white beauty dish? The Joel Grimes, is that silver lined?
I think it's silver lined.
I believe so. And that'll give you more punch than the white, or more output.
It's going to give you more crunch. Was that what you said, crunch?
Punch, crunch, just a bunch of
It's going to be a little bit, it's going to have basically more highlights in it because the silver is going to bounce that light around a little bit more.
Yeah, higher output.
Yeah. Any other questions?
No, everybody's definitely loving the color work, and it's, if you didn't skip over any slides or anything, right?
Well, there was 2 that were missing that I'm sad about because they were pretty cool.
Aw.
But I don't know where they went. Anyhow.
They ran away.
They totally ran away. It happens. Anyhow, this is my Instagram feed, so feel free to follow me on Instagram if you like. We'll be doing more of these sessions as the days go by, and also deeper programming post Photofest too, so stay tuned for that. I'll just take a moment to thank all of you guys for tuning in and for your awesome questions. And we're going to go offline here. What?
Elizabeth is wondering if we're going to send deals for these accessories.
I think there are some promos available, so make sure you're registered. And if you registered today, you might not get an email today. They're going out periodically throughout the week. So if you didn't get it today, you should get something soon. I believe there are some deals on Lensbaby stuff, but unfortunately we can't get into the actual details of the deals because we're not allowed to. So if you've attended Photofest in person before, we always have these offers available in store only. But for this event, because we've had to do it virtually, a lot of our partners and vendors have been able to provide offers, but at a limited capacity. So they can only go out in the emails, and unfortunately they can't be shared online. So be sure you're registered. If you registered like a day or two ago and you haven't gotten that email, feel free to send me an email and I'll make sure you get it. My email at Glazers is kateh@glazerscamera.com. And if need be, my business email is also on the screen there, so you can email me either place. We definitely want to make sure you get the promos for this week because they're only available till the 20th, so very important.
We want to save you money.
We want to save you money and get you cool gear. And if you have follow-up questions from this particular session, please feel free to email me at info@katehailey.com, or you can message me on Instagram, whichever works for you. So thank you again so much for tuning in. We appreciate your time. I appreciate your time. I hope you got something out of this session. And we'll see you at 3:15 with Matthew Sutherland, who is a Panasonic ambassador, and we're going to talk about creating videos for documentaries. So thanks so much.